Lane Kiffin looks to extend his Egg Bowl dominance to rare levels.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss Podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. You're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hello, I'm Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media and a former Ole Miss staff member. Today, we're diving into where the Ole Miss Rebels season stands with just one regular season game left. Yes, it's the Egg Bowl, and yes, it's against Mississippi State. Lane Kiffin, though, is on the brink of history, aiming for his fourth Egg Bowl win in 5 years, a feat that's only been accomplished in the modern era by John Vaught and Billy Brewer. We'll break it all down with Jake Wimberley of ESPN 105.9 in this special Know Your Enemy episode. Can the Rebels close the season strong? Stick around. Let's talk about it. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and a special hello to the insiders and everydayers who make the show what it is. Don't forget to find a second listen on the network. Chris Gordy on Locked On SEC and Corey Burton on Locked On Vandy. They offer great perspectives on the SEC and Ole Miss. There is not a Locked On Mississippi State site right now. So if you know anybody that wants to do that, probably have them reach out to me. I'll set you up with somebody. But check them out as well. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel makes it to where you can place your first bet of $5 and win $150 in bonus bets. If that bet wins, go to FanDuel.com today. All right. So this game is interesting. Like I said in the preview, that Lane Kiffin has a chance to win his fourth Egg Bowl in 5 attempts. The only one he lost was that weird 2022 game that happened in a monsoon. It was Mike Leach's last game, rest his soul. But that was the Egg Bowl that Ole Miss lost. And honestly, I'm fine with Ole Miss losing that game. But Ole Miss has won the other 3. 2 games by Matt Corral. He won in Oxford and then won in Starkville before leading a team to the Sugar Bowl. And then Jaxson Dart in Starkville last year. This will be the last Egg Bowl for players like J.J. Pegues. The mayor of Oxford has a chance to really stick out. This game's going to be super important to him. Suntarine Perkins, we talked about that defensive line unit yesterday. Mississippians feel this game more than any other game on the schedule. Yes, Ole Miss fans like to joke around that LSU is our true rival and all of that stuff. This game hits different. The attitude in the building is different amongst Mississippi players for this game. We all remember how C.J. Johnson was about this Mississippi State game. We all remember Cody Pruitt, David Cutcliffe, Billy Brewer going all the way through as this rivalry rose to the level it was a couple of years ago. It was because of how much they care about it on both sides. And we always like to make jokes as Ole Miss fans that Mississippi State fans care too much. The 3 biggest Mississippi State wins this year is Ole Miss Kentucky, Ole Miss LSU, and Ole Miss Florida. That is something that Ole Miss fans like to joke about. But the hatred does go both ways, even though you don't want to act like it. They don't act like it. So we'll see exactly how it goes. Anyway, we have Jake Wimberley from 105.9 in Mississippi. He's going to be the Know Your Enemy segment. He's going to be our crossover on the Mississippi State Bulldogs. Here we go. We're going inside Thunderdome with Jake Wimberley from 105.9 in Central Mississippi, the ESPN network down there as well. Jake Wimberley comes by our show every year and talks Egg Bowl with us. Just so everybody knows, me and Jake went to middle school together way back when in Florence Middle School. So Jake, this is an interesting game, so much interesting than it was a week ago. And it's not exactly even what people were expecting at the beginning of the year, because you have Ole Miss fans that are very disheartened at this point, and they're waiting to see if they have a shot to get into the playoffs still. And you have Mississippi State that is having potentially the worst season since Rocky Felker times in Starkville.
Yeah, it is. And Steven, always a pleasure to visit with you guys, and appreciate you having me. It's just like you said, it's a weird dynamic where we're at in this series. And I'm not throw the records out kind of guy. I've never really, I mean, you can do that in some of this, but typically the better team wins this game. And I think Ole Miss is going to easily win the game. There's just a lot of stories inside this. As you referenced, the playoff, what does Ole Miss need to do? Can they get in, after losing to Florida this past weekend? For Mississippi State, I think it's you've already kind of moved on to next year, and you want to go play the best ball game you can. Obviously, they'd love to win it, but this team is atrocious. It's not any fault of the current staff that's there. Jeff Lebby has a ton of work to do. Already being told that there's going to be major roster churn on this Mississippi State team moving into next year. We'll see what that looks like, but you could say that about probably 60% of the SEC. What we see today will not be what we see next year in the SEC.
Yeah, that's just the nature of college football right now. And honestly, the coaches, the players, the fans, and everybody, they're all just kind of figuring out in real time how to follow college football, because you don't treat a college player today the same way you would in 2008, because that college player may be making $2 million a year.
Oh, no doubt about it. I mean, and this is another story for another day on where we're going with this whole deal with name, image, and likeness and these collectives and the transfer portal and all this stuff. But you're right. It's a totally different deal. And, players now have options. They can go do other things. That's, I think, why you're seeing, for instance, Alabama is not able to stockpile talent like they were just 5 years ago, or Georgia even 3 or 4 years ago. Guys just aren't sitting around. They want to get paid. They want to play. And you're seeing that play out in real time in the SEC when you look at, what South Carolina's been able to do, what Ole Miss has been able to do. And by the way, I mean, I know this is not where Ole Miss fans want to be, but it's still a very good season. It's just, it was playoff or bust this year. And, I thought Ole Miss would make the playoff. We'll see what happens with the committee, but the parity, and I hate that term, but the parity that this has brought inside the conference, and not just this conference, but around college football, is pretty staggering. I mean, we've had some unbelievable weekends across this football season, and I think we're going to see more of that, this weekend, next weekend, and throughout the playoff.
Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen. When we come back, we'll talk about Michael Van Buren and the other players to watch for Mississippi State and Ole Miss in this year's Egg Bowl. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. Stick around. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. Ole Miss is currently a 26.5-point favorite over the Mississippi State Bulldog in the Egg Bowl. I'm personally worried about how the team is going to react after the Florida game and how it's going to look, but I was also worried going into Fayetteville. So this offense can really take off at times when you least expect it. So we'll see how it goes. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place those bets. Just visit FanDuel.com today and join. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, we are back in Thunderdome with Jake Wimberley from 105.9 in Central Mississippi. Time to get on the players to watch in this Egg Bowl. I think from a Mississippi State perspective, as far as an outsider looking in, is Michael Van Buren or bust, kind of. He is the guy. He was tailor-made for that offense under Jeff Lebby, the same way that like a Matt Corral was when he was in Oxford. The problem for Mississippi State is something that I said before the season, and Mississippi State fans got angry with me about that on this one. And I said, yeah, this is going to be fine, but the third time that you have a 55-53 game, it's going to drive you absolutely crazy when you're a program built on running the ball and playing defense. Whenever you suddenly don't have a defense, it's going to be problematic. And lo and behold, that's exactly what has played out.
Oh, it has been. And there's a lot of chatter. I know it's out there publicly about, the defensive coordinator at Mississippi State, and is he going to stay or is he going to go? Is it his fault? Is it not? I mean, I'll tell you this, Steven, and this is just my opinion. I don't know that there's more than one or two guys on that Mississippi State defense that could start on any other defensive unit in the Southeastern Conference. And that's not a shot at those young men. I'm sure they're very good young men, very, very great to be around. I mean, they're nice players, but they need bodies. I mean, this is a team that I mean, it has prided itself over the last decade on at least defensive players, like you said, running the football, being able to play physical defense. They don't have that. I mean, they don't have it along the front line, the second layer of defense, the back end of defense. But back to your point about Van Buren, he's a guy that obviously he's priority one. You've got to hold on. And, Jeff Lebby's going to have some decisions to make. And those decisions are probably already being, made internally. Do you bring, back Blake Shaping, or is it one or the other? Because you're going to have to pay both of them. And that's how it works. Oh, and by the way, if you can hold on to Kamario Taylor from Noxubee County, you're going to have to pay him as well. So every quarterback room is going to fight this about, hey, where do we go? How much money do we want to put in? But Van Buren is going to be, priority one, I think, to keep around because he's young. He understands the offense and he looks like he's got a pretty good upside.
Yeah, whenever you look at quarterbacks, Ole Miss has a similar type situation. So it's always good to have an incumbent quarterback because it's less expensive to keep them than it is to acquire them.
Yeah.
So somebody like Michael Van Buren, he needs to be protected at all costs. Chapin should be allowed to walk and use that money to direct to Taylor. And that's probably the best plan for Mississippi State because the same situation is happening a little bit at Ole Miss. All of the money is probably going to go into Austin Simmons. And then they're probably going to let Walker Howard walk. I would imagine he's going to end up at like ULL or something like that playing quarterback. And then Ole Miss is going to try and recruit underneath that as well. But it's always a beneficial thing right now in this transfer portal environment when you don't need a quarterback. If you can avoid some of those high dollar positions, you can really build up the rest of your team. And that's what Ole Miss's defense did this year.
Oh, no, you're absolutely correct. And you look at some of the Mississippi State players that they'll have to protect, some guys you'll see this weekend. I mean, Kevin Coleman Jr. Has had a heck of a year as a junior. We'll see. You would hope that he sticks around. A lot of these receivers like to try to test their lot as far as underclassmen for the National Football League draft. I think he needs another year. Mario Craver's a guy that's come along and played very, very well. Jordan Mosley's a wide receiver, again, another junior who's had some extensive time. So, Kelly Akari is a guy who, you wished he had another season. He likely will not be able to get that, but there's some nice, players on this Mississippi State wide receiving unit. The problem has been for Mississippi State is you just don't have a go-to running back. I know that's going to be a priority in the transfer portal, kind of a home run hit type of back. They just don't have that. And then the offensive front has got to improve as well. So, when you look at the offensive side, we know what Jeff Lebby wants to do. Obviously, you're familiar with Jeff Lebby, his time in Oxford, and Ole Miss fans are as well. He wants to run it fast. He wants to score, but that's just part of the problem here for Mississippi State. You got to look at that defense as well.
Yeah, and everybody needs to probably remember 2020. Jeff Lebby's went up against Pete Golding when Pete Golding was at Bama and Lebby was at Ole Miss, and that was the night that Matt Corral and all that, it felt like Ole Miss was going to pull that out. If Ole Miss had a defense at all, which, again, we bring that up again, they probably could have won that game. Lebby had a lot of success. He didn't have as much success in 2021 as well, so maybe Golding saw some things and figured out what needed to be done. But I think State's going to be able to score the ball in this game a little bit. I don't see if there's a way that Ole Miss keeps them below 17 or 20 points in this game. I just don't.
Probably not. I mean, State's average, right at 27 per ball game. Of course, they're giving up 35, which is, much higher than we've seen over the last 10 to 15 years. Here's what I'll be interested to see out of Ole Miss, especially with the rankings coming out tonight. And we'll know. I mean, the players know, the coaches know. I use the LSU example. And what I mean by this is I was asked this question on a radio show this morning out of Memphis, Tennessee. We were talking about kind of going around the SEC, LSU, Oklahoma. Is LSU, have they just cashed it in? Have the players just checked out? Do Ole Miss players kind of check out this weekend if they know, well, it's not going to be the playoff. We really don't care about playing in a bowl game. Some will, some won't. And this isn't specific to Ole Miss. This is around college football now. What is the buy-in going to be? If Ole Miss is dialed in, they're going to beat Mississippi State as bad as they want to. If they're not, then we could see a game where, this is a 35-17 type ball game. I think Mississippi State will be able to score some points. Unfortunately for Mississippi State, they can't stop anybody.
Yeah, it's interesting. What is the weak point of that Mississippi State defense? Because the defense is a weak point, but What is the pure glaring weak point of this defense?
I think one has got to be up front. They just don't have bodies. I mean, they've got people, but I mean, you'll see it. I mean, it'll be on display in the Egg Bowl. I mean, Ole Miss, obviously, their defensive front is one of the best, if not the best in the country. When you look at their front seven, Mississippi State's is not. It is a shell of that, and I think that's the biggest obstacle right now is, there's no Fletcher Coxes or Chris Jones or Jeffrey Simmons or, D'Amico Autry's. There's none of that. There's not one of that at Mississippi State now. So, these are nice players, but if we're being honest, I mean, these are guys that probably should be playing, in great schools. They should be playing at South Alabama. They should probably be playing at Louisiana Tech, not in the Southeastern Conference. And I think that's where it starts is the defensive front. As we well know, if you can't get pressure on a quarterback, if your defensive backs are average to just above, then that makes them less. Linebackers can't run and flow, and I think that's where it all starts.
Now, this is a weird question because he's just an analyst at Ole Miss, but how much of an impact do you think Zach Arnett is wanting to do this, understanding the personnel that Jeff Lebby has, and really kind of wants to stick it to Mississippi State?
Oh, I'm sure he does, right? I mean, look, that's the thing, and what I'll be interested to see is, Leach and Kiffin, rest in peace, Mike Leach, had such a nice, weird, fun relationship. I still don't really know how Lebby and Kiffin are today. I mean, I assume it's good. Maybe it's not. They don't really talk about it. So, but Arnett, I can guarantee you, he doesn't care how bad State is. He would love to just kind of grind them in the mud just a little bit more. I can promise you that.
Yeah, it should be pretty good. All right. So when we come back, we will talk about score predictions and path to victories. I'm with Jake Wimberley of 105.9 in Central Mississippi. Stick around. All right, we're going on to do storylines, path to victories, and all of that stuff. I think the main storyline for Ole Miss, like you said, is how bought in is Ole Miss. How locked in they are. If they are, I mean, it could easily be a 50-burger in this game. We saw against Arkansas what this team can look like when it's clicking. When it's not clicking, I don't know if Mississippi State has the athletes, like you said, on the defensive side of the ball to do what Ford and do what Kentucky and do what LSU did to Ole Miss. I still think Ole Miss is going to be able to score the ball more than Mississippi State is going to be able to score the ball in that game. So if Ole Miss just plays,
yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I was just agreeing with you. Yes.
Yeah. So if Ole Miss just plays clean this game, avoid the stupid turnovers, catch the football, no penalties, do not go for it unnecessarily. This is not a game that you should go for a single fourth down conversion in. If Ole Miss does that, this line is pretty accurate.
No, I agree with you 100%. If Ole Miss plays clean, if they're dialed in, they'll, and I've said this for 3 weeks, they'll beat Mississippi State as bad as they want to. I mean, they just will. If they're not, the only path to victory for Mississippi State, if there was one, would be Ole Miss just doesn't care. They turn it over 2 or 3 times. They give State the short field. They break down on special teams, and keep Mississippi State in this game in the fourth quarter, and then let them start believing a little bit in this thing. But that's the only way. If Ole Miss is dialed in on this just a little bit, I mean, unfortunately, this is not going to be one of your better Egg Bowls if you're a Mississippi State fan.
Yeah, there is a greater potential for a 2008 repeat than not.
So I agree. Yeah, I agree 100%.
It should be pretty interesting what's going on. Now, real quick, anything weird that is going on the Mississippi State side that Ole Miss fans might not know about, might be interested in within the football program? I'm just like, any storylines that nobody's thinking about, any players that we might be able to see, because I got one for you whenever you're done.
Not that I can think of. I mean, I think right now Mississippi State fans this is where they are with their football program. You got to get rid of Coleman Hutzler. Right, wrong, or indifferent, we'll see. Defensive coordinator, we have no idea what's going to happen with that. If he is for sure out, who's that guy going to be? Then it's looking towards recruiting, holding on to players that's committed. Georgia is come in late on Kamario Taylor. We'll see, how that looks. Still got some time there. So it's all about, hey, how high can they climb the ladder next year? Or can they get out of the basement? Can they be, this is going to sound so weird, Vanderbilt of this year? I mean, you'd love to be Vanderbilt this year. I mean, what a story that's been. So not really. It's just, hey, let's get out of this thing. Let's turn the page to next year.
And how come we haven't seen like J.J. Harrell and Braylon Burnside and that ballyhooed wide receiver group that went to Starkville? What has gone on with them?
Well, they've been quiet on that. You would just have to think at this point, especially with young receivers, they just haven't been able to pick it up. As far as the scheme, they're not physically ready. Maybe their route running is not as precise. I mean, you see guys that come in as wide receiver that make an impact as a freshman. Those guys, kind of have the whole package. Whereas sometimes, and I'm not saying it's the case with these guys, and you guys know this, is sometimes if a guy's an elite player on a high school level and he's just running go routes and he's running flags and he's running, they're throwing fades, that's one thing. But to really sit down and understand, an offensive strategy, how coaches route running, being able to get that separation and all the stuff that makes you a wide receiver, I would assume it's more that in the playbook. And, that's literally what it's going to be about.
Yeah, the one surprising thing that Mississippi State fans might have about Ole Miss will be possibly the role of Aiden Williams in this game, of all people. Trey Harris is obviously out. He got hurt against Florida, and it looks like Jordan Watkins tweaked a hamstring in that game as well. Of course, with injuries and everything else, you're not going to get a single thing out of Ole Miss. But if that happens and they're down 2 in a game where you have to assume a lot of opt-outs are going to happen in 5 days, something like that, you want to see what you have for the bowl game and beyond. So I think Aiden Williams might be giving his opportunity to come out and make a play.
Hey, and I'm pulling for that guy. I know that family pretty well. I know his father. He is that is a really good family. I know that hasn't popped off like they wanted to. Talking about a freshman wide receiver, when you were asking about Mississippi State's, he came to mind. Because a guy that really just torched Mississippi high school football. I mean, just tore it up. And for whatever reason, injuries, culmination of things, that just hasn't worked out yet. But I am pulling for that guy and that family. I hope that this is his pop-off point from this point forward.
All right, let's do score predictions real quick. What is your score prediction for the Battle of the Golden Egg this year?
I am going to say, based on what we know, I am going to think Lane Kiffin and that staff have Ole Miss ready to go. I am going to say probably Ole Miss wins that ball game somewhere in the neighborhood of 48-17.
48-17. I am going to say that Ole Miss is going to win that game 31-17 because I am worried, obviously, the emotional valley that I'm in. I think that Ole Miss is going to win the game, but I'm thinking it's going to be a little bit closer than that. So anything else we need to know, Jake? What are you hearing? What do you know?
Know that the SEC may not get for their 4 teams right in the playoff. I mean, it looks like 3 right now when you're talking about Texas, I think Tennessee and Georgia. Right now, Ole Miss looks on the outside looking in. Alabama does as well. We'll see what the committee does. I mean, Texas A&M could win their way in. And I think, and I said this morning, the SEC really, I think, privately has to decide, do they really want that 9th game? We talked about that. Do we want a 9th conference game? Because if we think we've cannibalized each other this year, you add an extra game to that. So that'll be interesting to see in the offseason. Also, how the SEC looks moving forward. It's been a different looking SEC with not just the transfer portal and name, image, and likeness and all that stuff. When you took the divisions away and we put everybody in one box, all of a sudden the conference looks much different.
Yeah. Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Jake Wimberley, 105.9 Central Mississippi ESPN Network. Jake, are you heading up to the ball game or are you just going to watch it on television?
No, actually working. We got high school football action. I do the play-by-play and media for Brandon High School. We're headed to Ocean Springs for South State Championship on Friday. So I will have to catch it as we move, likely on radio or on the mobile device.
Yes, and my McGee Trojans are in South State as well. So
yes, they are.
Pretty fantastic. Anyway, Jake, enjoy your trip. Safe travels down to Ocean Springs, and we'll talk to you later, bud.
All right. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves on offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we're the #1 Ole Miss podcast. Your support means the world to us. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen to the day. For your second listen, check out Locked On SEC podcast. Host Chris Gordy holds no punches covering the best conference in college football. Find Locked On SEC on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. We have a segment that is going to air on this channel. It's going to happen Thursday night before the game of me on Locked On SEC earlier this week. And also exciting news, you can now become a Locked On Ole Miss Insider. The best and easiest way to stay updated on all things Ole Miss sports is our texting program that sends you notifications on everything relevant without the hassle of message boards filled with trolls. Enjoy a 14-day free trial and experience the future of college sports coverage. We're adding new perks as we grow, so do not miss out. The link is down in the description. And for those of you watching on YouTube, we will send you to Locked On College Sports right now. Howdy toddy, everyone.